Welcome back, everyone, to Christy and Coimbra. For those of you who are new here, I'm Christy Peters. I am a real estate professional who moved from the US to Portugal a little over 3 years ago. I am a real estate agent with Coldwell Banker here in Portugal, and so I'm using this channel to help you learn about the process of moving abroad in general, and also specifically about the real estate process here, whether it be buying, selling, or leasing. So today I wanted to talk about differences from the US to buying here in Portugal. Again, for those of you who are new here, I have been a licensed real estate broker in the States for over 20 years. And so this is not something new for me. This has been my career ever since I graduated from college. I started my career in commercial real estate, branched into having my own brokerage company, which I still own in the US, adding residential services. And so when I moved to Portugal, I, of course, wanted to continue my career. It's not a flash in the pan for me. Again, this is my entire adult working life has been in real estate. I've been a real estate broker as well as the owner of a construction company and a licensed general contractor. So this is what I do. Real estate, I live, eat, breathe real estate. It is the thing that I'm very passionate about. So, as I learn things here in Portugal, I want to share with you because you will have to navigate your new life. Um, it's not just trying to come here and drink sangria. You really need to know how to integrate into the country. You need to be very proficient in the ways that things are done, not only culturally, but legally here. So that's my job, is to act as your boots on the ground kind of intermediary, your guide, if you will, your concierge, to help you make that adjustment easier and smoother. So the first thing today's topic is going to be, how does the system for purchasing a home here differ from the US? And I think a lot of people here will be who are here from the US or thinking about relocating from the US to Portugal will be surprised at how different it can truly be. So, in the States, I moved here from Georgia. I'm originally from New Jersey, but I moved here from Atlanta. And in Georgia, we have what is called the Real Estate Commission, the Georgia Real Estate Commission. Here in Portugal, they have an oversight committee that handles construction and real estate, but it works differently here. It's not state to state. It is a countrywide entity. And so one of the major differences here is that a person practicing real estate as an agent under a brokerage, they don't themselves have to go through a class with a certain amount of hours. In the States, we have to have, I think it's, and forgive me, it's been a while since I got licensed. I believe it's 75 hours of pre-licensing to get your agent's license. And then you have to practice for a certain amount of time and then get additional hours of license of courses to then be able to sit for your broker's exam. So in the States, we go through a really rigorous process to be licensed in the States. Here, that particular type of process does not exist. And so that doesn't mean that people here in Portugal and who practice a profession aren't professional. They're very professional, but there's a difference, I think, in the amount of rigor that it takes to really say, I have a firm grasp of everything in my field of study versus someone who comes from that background. Like in the States, I still have to go through continuing education to maintain my license, to renew it every few years. And so I think that really does make someone like me stand out in this profession here, because I have to do that ongoing education all the time. And so I have hundreds of hours of training, whether it be in financing of a home, of how to deal with a foreclosure, or to facilitate short sales. I have staging, you name it, I've probably done it. So it is a very good thing. I personally believe in licensing and continuing education because it helps you make you better at your craft, whatever your craft may be. So there's that when you're vetting your real estate professional, just to ask them, how do they go about making sure that they are well versed on the laws in their chosen profession, as well as how are they encouraged to continue to grow and train and become more and more proficient in their industry. So that's number one. Now I'll move into how the actual purchasing, not just who you're represented by, but how the purchasing differs. So in the States, for instance, where I'm from, or where I lived in Georgia, you have the Georgia Association of Realtors, which is the state chapter of the National Association of Realtors. And so as a realtor, oftentimes, when we're assisting a client with purchasing, we'll use what is called a GAR form, and that's the Georgia Association of Realtors form. So, if you are a realtor, you have access to this. If you are not a paid, because there's a difference between a real estate agent and a realtor. I think we should address that too. I know people use those terms interchangeably, but they're not the same thing. So, a real estate agent is someone who, in the States specifically, is what I'm talking about here. In the States, a real estate agent is someone who's gone through the process of getting licensed and can practice in the profession of real estate. Their license is held, hung with a brokerage firm, and then they also have to adhere to, of course, the rules and regulations in their state. And if there's an issue, people can lodge a complaint, and you can file that with the commission, who will then investigate that and decide if there's a need for disciplinary action. Um, a realtor is an agent who has decided to go maybe a step further and belongs to the National Association of Realtors. And so the National Association of Realtors just holds a person in the real estate profession to a bit of a higher standard. You definitely have to go through the ethics course for your code of conduct about how we will be more professional than your average person um, who is in the practice of real estate. So, yes, people do use those terms interchangeably, but there in the States, there is a difference. Um, but for the purposes of this video or just talking in general, we can still use that term. So, in the States, when you're purchasing, your realtor or your real estate agent, depending on if they have access to that form, they will typically use a GAR form. And the reason for a GAR form is because the GAR forms are revised every now and then based on situations that come to light, whether it be a lawsuit or a dispute of some sort or some type of new legislation that's passed. The purpose of that GAR form, that contract form, is to incorporate that experience into a form so that your professional doesn't have to run the risk of perhaps not incorporating something really pertinent when they're writing your contract. So it's a standardized form. It doesn't mean it catches everything, but typically we have things in there like a financing contingency. If the person doesn't qualify for a mortgage, then they are able to be able to terminate that agreement with no kind of penalty to them, depending on whatever the terms of that contract stipulate. So we have those kind of things. We have appraisal contingencies. We have financing contingencies. You have seller disclosures, seller disclosure form, which often accompanies that contract, so that the seller has to disclose anything that they are aware of that is definitely impactful for the sale of that property. It is incumbent upon them to disclose something that um, it is not a latent defect, but something that, they see all the time and would impact a person wanting to purchase or not purchase. Here in Portugal, there are no seller disclosure forms. And so I think that's a major difference in the way, one of the ways we handle the property acquisition process here versus the States. So a buyer here needs to understand you will not get a seller disclosure form. Um, you can ask you and should ask your representative should ask those questions about anything that is defective that the owner is aware of in the home, but there will be no formalized form. So the fact that I talked about the GAR form, I want to talk about the form here that's typically used for offers, and that is the CPCV. So it's the Contrato de Promesa de Compra y Venda. So it is the contract of the promise for buying and selling, and it's basically the promissory contract. So that is your agreement of where you outline terms as related to your offer for a purchase. Now, the CPCV is very important. Number one, it's not mandated by law to use it. You can write up a contract if you want on the back of a napkin if you both agree to it. However, if you use the CPCV, and I heavily suggest you use a CPC-CV form, and a really good professional will make sure that you do it. If you're using that CPCV form, it is a legally binding document. So once you guys sign that document, the buyer and seller both sign that, both parties sign that document, it is a binding document in the Portuguese court of law. It will be recognized as what is stipulating the terms of your agreement. So the thing about the CPCV that every buyer has to be aware of is that once you do that, you typically sign that and you make a deposit on the property. In the States, we have what we would call earnest money. If you are making a good faith offer to a seller, you would typically pay them 1 to 3%, sometimes up to 5% as an earnest money deposit. And that earnest money, it should be held in escrow so that it's not in my account as a buyer, it's not in your account as a seller, it is in an independent account, whether it be the broker's escrow account or an independent party's third party's escrow service. It is in an escrow account. It doesn't work that way here. Here, when you make the deposit, which will not be 1 to 3%, typically it's anywhere from 10% up to 30%. It could be more for extranjeros, for foreigners. So let's say you're a stranger, a foreigner, and you're purchasing a property here. You may need to give someone a 30% deposit. Here's the kicker with that. That deposit is paid directly to the seller. It does not sit in an escrow account. You are literally sending the seller that deposit. So prayerfully, people are on the up and up. If something were to go awry with the contract and something happened and you needed to terminate it and it wasn't anyone's fault beyond what's stipulated in that contract, then you would hope to have a party who is honest and has integrity and give you your money back. But we all know they're human beings are human beings, and people who are less than above board exist everywhere. So putting that kind of money directly into the hands of someone else makes me as a representative nervous. What you could do is in part of your CPC terms is say that that money will be held by either the attorney, your attorney who's representing you as a buyer, or your agent, your real estate agency's client account that holds that money, so that you know that those people who don't really have skin in the game as far as the actual sale of the property will be more inclined to refund that money or distribute that money as it should be. So that is a big, big thing for people to be aware of. That the deposit, which is called the sinal is paid directly, typically, to the seller. And if you aren't comfortable with that, then make sure your terms in your CPCV stipulate how that money will be held until the deal is closed. The other part is that you must be aware that if for whatever reason you are not making a cash buy, you're not purchasing that house all cash, and you need to get mortgage financing, it needs to say in that CPCV, you need to add that language, is that it's contingent upon you getting approved for the mortgage that would allow you to facilitate the purchase of that property. If you do not have that language in there and you get turned down for a mortgage, it's bye-bye deposit. Like you're not getting that money back because you did not stipulate that. So we need to be very clear about what kind of terms make it into that CPCV. And I'm going to say we're used to just signing contracts, offers in the States. You will not do that here typically. You don't get to the CPCV until you kind of flesh out the terms, either verbally or through WhatsApp is very popular here. So I would say you need to have all of these terms of what you want and work that out before you get to the CPCV. Because once that CPCV is signed, it's no turning back at that point. So if you are saying, I want my money, my deposit held by this particular entity, it needs to be in there. If you want to say, if for whatever reason I'm not approved for this mortgage, I get my deposit back, that needs to make its way into your offer. And so those terms will be very clearly defined before we give someone a CPCV. And then once those terms are agreed to, then you can do the CPCV. Um, but not until we have very, very clear definition of what will happen with that, because uh, banks here are very conservative. So if you're thinking, I'm banking on getting a loan for 70%, and the bank says, no, we'll loan you 60%, then you're going to have to come up with that other 10% that you weren't planning on. And if that is not defined in that CPCV and you don't have it, the seller's gonna be like, that's not my problem. And legally, they'd be able to hold your deposit. So buying real estate here is no joke. You should not do it without real estate representation and legal representation. A very good attorney, Avogado. You should have a very good attorney and a very good real estate professional, whether it be me or anybody else, to represent your interest and walk you through this step by step. And part of the due diligence here too is in the States, we will have something we call title search, right? You get a title company and they do a title search to make sure that there's no funny business along with the bundle of rights that come with ownership of a property. Here, they don't do title search. Your attorney is going to do their due diligence as far as when that CPCV, hopefully the terms are very, very specific in the CPCV of all the things you need to have in there to protect you. And then once you have that, they're going to do their due diligence and make sure that, or it could be before, it depends on your attorney and what kind of process and financial arrangements you've made. But the attorney, for all intents and purposes, they're going to do their due diligence um, when you have that CPCV, and they're going to research three documents specifically, and that's going to be your certidão permanente, which is the land registry card. So your certidão permanente, your caderneta predio, which is the tax card for the property, and your use license about how that property is able to be used, whether it's able to be used as a home. What he's going to do is make sure all the details on all three of those documents match, from the owner's name to the size to the way it's described to I don't know, every detail regarding its materials or whatever's spelled out on each one of those three pieces of documents, they need to match. And if those three things have any type of discrepancy, it's a problem, it's a red flag. So that, instead of having a formalized title search, your attorney, your legal representative is going to look for the details on all three of those documents. And it's not uncommon here, especially if you're purchasing a quinta, which is basically kind of like a farm or a rural property. It is not uncommon, not even just for a rural property, for urban property too. It's not uncommon for there to be additions to properties that weren't properly licensed. And that's a whole other can of worms. If someone has added an annex of any kind, whether it be a veranda or just a small room on the back, if they haven't gone to the junta, to the camera, the city hall, the municipality, and formally gotten um, project approval for that, you could be made to tear it down. And I have actually known someone personally that happened to, and it wasn't pretty. They lost a lot of money, and she was very upset because she's like, that's the back wall of my house. Basically, I have to tear this down, and the back wall of my house comes down, and I have to rebuild that. Well, she had to do it. So making sure that everything with that property has been properly licensed and approved by the municipality is very key when you're purchasing a property here. So where are we? We've talked about the Sinal with the deposit. We've talked about the three pieces of paperwork that will specify that. And I guess I could get into it a bit more. So your Certidão Permanente is the card you get from the land registry. And basically, it shows property details like the address, the owners. if there's a mortgage on the property, if there's some type of claim against the property, like a lien, we'd call that in the States a lien. If there's they call it rights of way. If there's a right of way, basically like an easement with the property, all of that is going to be on that certidão. And your carnet de prédio, which is basically the building tax card, that's from the tax authority, and it shows the taxpayer details, their name, they live, their NIF. You always need a NIF here. The NIF is key to your whole life here in Portugal. It is your fiscal identification number. And so everything you do here centers around your NIF. You will include that NIF in every kind of legal document there is here. So the NIF will be on that paperwork for the owner, just little details like that. And again, we talked about the use license and making sure that the property can be used for what you want it to be used for. Sometimes people will buy properties because they have been told that they can use it as a rental property, and then they figure out that that property doesn't have a proper AL, which is the alojamento license, like the license to be able to rent temporarily, short term or what have you, or longer term. But the AL, you'll see the AL license when you go to an Airbnb here. And sometimes properties don't have that proper documentation to be able to do that legally. So if you're buying it with the hope that you can get rental income from that and it doesn't have that, you're screwed. So so we have to make sure that all of those things are in order. So I think there were some things I wanted to cover today. I think that's pretty much covers it. Oh, also that I understand there's no MLS here. So the MLS is the I'm sorry, the multiple listing service and that we have in the States. And so it allows people to be able to go in and see properties that are for sale, have sold. Um, it allows a lot of transparency. There is no MLS here. And I would say that is one of the things that I understand that that is actually in the works right now and in beta form. And so I think that it will greatly improve the way that we do real estate here in Portugal. And that's for everyone's benefit. It's beneficial for buyers and sellers to have that information readily accessible. In the States, we can go to your tax assessor. You can go to your tax assessor's website and literally see the history of that property sales. And so actual sales, like what it actually sold for. Yes, we have Zillow and Trulia and Realtor.com, and you can go on there anytime and look for a property and sometimes get that information too. But the tax assessor site literally tells you not only how much, how big the property is or what have you, but it has a record of the sales for that property. Because that does not exist here, it's more difficult, I would say, to get an idea of what actual property value should be. It is difficult, more difficult here to get comps. And so you hear a lot about Portugal being the hottest real estate market in Europe as far as price appreciation. And my opinion, as someone who has done, and I hope I'm not going to make my Portuguese colleagues upset with this, um, but I'm just calling it like I see it. I feel like the property appreciation that we see here and how overheated it is, and actually there was a report that said that the EU feels like the property values in Portugal are inflated, probably 25% above what they should be. I do agree with that because really it's a guessing game. If you don't have any source that you can go to literally see what comparable properties in that area have sold for as a consumer, as a buyer, it makes it a guessing game as to what the property is worth. And I think what makes the properties here so overheated are that you have not just your average workaday person who needs a mortgage, you have buyers here, a lot of foreign buyers, and people think it's always Americans. Americans were not even the top 10 of immigrant groups here. It's other buyers. So you get other buyers here who are very wealthy and flush with cash, and they don't have to worry about the banks valuation, and they don't have to worry about whether the bank's valuation, the appraisal, is going to come in at the asking price. If the asking price is and what will sell is what they're willing to bear. So when they are a cash buyer and they are, for whatever reason, they just really love Portugal and they really want a vacation home here, or they really want to retire here and they have the cash and the means, and for whatever reason the property gives them the characteristics that are important to them, then they pay the price. They will pay it because they don't have to worry about it being vetted and actually being worth that amount of money. So it, unfortunately, I think it impacts why we have such a problem here with housing affordability for the average Portuguese person, people who work hard every day and deserve to have a place to live because and be able to buy something with their paycheck in the place they were born, is because of, in my opinion, outside cash and not having that transparency that says, oh, this property has a history. This area typically sells between this and this per square meter, instead of it's influenced by maybe an outliers of a handful of cash buyers versus people who need a mortgage. And this is what the property can actually be data proven to be worth. So I think that is a huge, huge difference for us here, is that we don't have the level of transparency as far as availability of factual information about sales that probably Americans are very used to having at their fingertips. Here you can go to the the land registry office, and you can request if there's a property you're interested in, a building. Let's say you were driving and you saw a house that you really love and you're like, I want to know more about that property. You can go to land registry office and pay for the property card, not the caderneta, because that's specific for the owner because it has their tax information. But you can certainly inquire about the Certidão Permanente, and I think it's like €15 to buy that. But that's an expensive. There's 5 houses, and I want to know about all five. Then I have to pay €75 to even get the information about them. And so I really hope and pray. Again, I am new here, not really new, I don't feel new, but after 3 years here, I'm someone who hopes to have citizenship eventually in my new home country. I do hope that we develop systems that allow that information to be more accessible to the public, because I think it's better for the average person who is not rich, who is not cash flush, to be able to have a better chance of purchasing when you have actual um, statistics behind it. And I think that's also why banks here are very conservative when they are evaluating properties and giving it a value when you're trying to get a mortgage, because it's more like an art here. And that's what I'll say about that. So I hope this is helpful in helping you to begin to think about the ways you need to educate yourself about the property transaction process here, specifically acquiring a property. And if you'd like for me to do more about this and make an actual series where I talk about each one of these things in depth, please let me know in the comments, or you can email me at info@christiancoimbra.com, or you can check out my website and drop an inquiry there through the questionnaire. But I would love to hear your thoughts about this, Portuguese and Americans alike, because I'm still learning. And if I said anything erroneous, please correct me. But I'm doing my best. And I think that is something else we have to do. You have to learn in public sometimes, and uh, there is no failing at anything. We learn new information, we process, we get better. So again, to my Portuguese um, friends out there, please, if there's anything that I've missed or said that's incorrect, please feel free to respectfully, respectfully always, for all of us, because I think the internet has done a disservice to human beings as far as how we interact with each other. But please, I look forward to correction if there's something I have said in error. And also for those of you who are very interested in moving to Portugal, of course, please contact me either here in the comments or you can email me, or you can go to my website, Christine, www.christinecoimbra.com. Um, but yeah, it's a lot to navigate. And so I would love for people to be as educated as possible before you just jump into it because the time is not after you've sent 30% of a property's asking price to the seller to figure out things you should have been able to know. So, any good, it doesn't have to be me, any good, really good real estate professional can absolutely walk you through the process, but you need to know the questions to ask because it's your money at the end of the day. So I hope this is helpful. I look forward to our next time speaking, getting together. If there's a topic you really, really want me to discuss that I haven't covered yet, again, please drop it in the comments and I will make a video about it. Okay, ciao to the next time. Have a wonderful weekend. Bom fim de semana.